with us is senior data reporter Harry Enten, who I like to call chief data reporter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So debate.
Yeah.
How much the peanut gallery is really cracking up this morning. I hear you, Randy. I'm going to have to talk with your mother later. How much do debates really matter in the end when it comes to November and actually voting?
Yeah, I mean, look, normally when you're heading into a first debate, a debate really won't make that much of a difference because one of the candidates is so far ahead. So if you go back since 1976, the average candidate, the average leader at this point, leads his opponent or her opponent by 6 percentage points. But look how close we are right now. We're just a 2-point race. While debates oftentimes really won't matter because the fact is one candidate is so far ahead, this is one of those rare debates that actually could matter because the race has been consistently close. Not just nationally where we see right now Harris up by just 2 points, well within any margin of error, but in those key battleground states as well. You know, I was talking with our dear colleague John yesterday. In the key battleground state or key Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it was a tie, right? It was 0 points that separated the two contenders. So the bottom line is, while debates oftentimes won't matter, this is a year in which this potentially sole debate between Harris and Trump really could matter.
Yeah, I mean, this is within the margin of error.
Yes.
So it can't be tighter. I think this is. I think before you talked about this being historically tight. So who sort of might get a bump, Harris or Trump? Who stands to benefit the most if they do well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most voters have made up their minds about Donald Trump, specifically undecided voters. So how undecided voters feel? Just need to learn more about Donald Trump. Just 18% of undecided voters say they need to learn more about Donald Trump. But look at this. A near majority of undecided voters say they want or need to learn more about Kamala Harris. Look, undecided voters don't really like either one of these folks. Donald Trump, which is an 8% favorable, Kamala Harris, which is a 13% favorable. But the bottom line is there's a lot more room for movement for Kamala Harris than there is for Donald Trump. So the real question tonight is, can Kamala Harris seize this opportunity, seize the spotlight, put to rest fears that they may have about her? Because the bottom line is undecided voters have already made up their mind about Donald Trump. They're waiting to make up their mind about Kamala Harris, and how they do so can make all the difference in the world at the end of the day come November.
How about the expectations? I mean, people literally put money on who's going to win the debate. You can bet on anything. What is the expectation?
Yeah, you know, if the expectation going into the first debate of this year, remember, this is the second first debate, as my cover slide kind of indicated, right? They thought that Donald Trump was going to win that first debate by an 8-point margin. Now the expectation game is on the other shoe, right? On the other foot. Look at this. When it comes to Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, Harris, the expectation is that she is going to beat Donald Trump. Now, it's not by that wide of a margin, but I think tonight the real question is, how does Kamala Harris get viewed and judged by the American public? Because as I said just a little bit ago, the American electorate has made up their mind about Donald Trump. They haven't made up their mind about Kamala Harris, and this may be her last best chance to get them on her side of the equation and not go with the Republican nominee for president.
And this may be the most number of Americans that she will and he will ever get until the election. It's huge.
It's a huge audience across all the networks, including this one, which is where you should watch, of course.
9 p.m.
There we go.
I understand it.
Yes, that's
Tonight,
what I hear.
That's what's happening.
Yes.
All right, to our beloved colleague and friend, John Berman.
And as Harry said, the foot is on the other shoe in this debate. Here with us now, CNN political commentator and former Biden White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield and Mark Lauder, former Strategic Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign. I am going to ask you both the same questions. We're going to take this in stages. I'm going to ask you what each candidate needs to accomplish and what each candidate needs to avoid. And I want to think about this as strategy, not necessarily as an advocate for each of you. So, Kate, first to you, what do you think Vice President Harris needs to accomplish tonight?
Sure. Well, I think she needs to define herself for the American people. We've just heard, obviously, this is a huge opportunity. A lot of eyeballs, a lot of people who don't know as much about her are likely to tune in tonight. So priority one for her should be to explain to people who she is, what she's motivated by, why she does what she does. You know, she has a really great opportunity to do that. And then I would say priority two for her is to define Donald Trump as more of the same, to really paint him as, you know, not a change agent, not a disruptor, but the guy who was president for 4 years, who has been on the national scene for 10 years, you know, contributing to the corrosion of civility in our politics. I mean, she really has an opportunity tonight to do that. So those are the two big things she needs to do. She needs to show the country who she is, talk about, you know, what motivates her, and also paint him as more of the same, yesterday's news, more of what people have rejected in 2020, frankly.
All right, Mark, so what does Donald Trump need to accomplish tonight?
Well, first and foremost, he needs to put Kamala Harris on notice that she is the reason why that we have higher gas and grocery prices, why the border is not secure, why the world is at war. And so, as Kate says, more of the same. She literally is more of the same failed Biden policies that 2/3 of the American people disagree with. So that's mission number one for him. Mission number two is remind people things were cheaper, the border was secure, world was not at war when he was in the White House.
So, Mark, what does Donald Trump need to avoid then tonight?
Well, I think he needs to avoid getting into kind of the personal stuff with Kamala Harris. He doesn't need to do it. He's basically got a built-in well of fond memories about the economy and his record. So all he has to do is remind people on a policy standpoint that it's her tie-breaking vote that caused the inflation. It was her who was the border czar, and let people make their own decisions about everything else on their own.
So, Kate, what does Kamala Harris need to avoid tonight?
She needs to avoid having this debate play out on Donald Trump's terms. I mean, she needs to avoid not letting the entire debate be sort of her on the defensive, her responding to him, her explaining. She really needs to think about tonight as an opportunity to tell her story, to talk about what she's going to do for the country, lay out her vision, chart her path, and not let this debate become a constant response to Donald Trump. Now, that's easier said than done. That's easier said than done in any debate, frankly, but certainly easier said than done when debating Donald Trump, who we know is going to be very aggressive, whether or not he chooses to, to go into the personal, which we know he likes to do as himself. We know that's where Donald Trump wants to go, clearly not where his team wants him to go. But either way, her aim needs to be to not allow the terms of this debate to be set by Donald Trump and to not be constantly baited into responding to him, but to think about this as an opportunity to be on her front foot and talking about things in the way that she wants to frame things.
So, Kate, of the tens of millions of people who will be watching, what's the most important sliver of the audience that she needs to reach?
Well, the undecided voters in the key swing states in this country. There are, give or take, 6, maybe 7 battleground states where this election is going to be decided, and there are voters in those states who have not yet decided who they're going to vote for. So for her, she really needs to be talking to people who have not made a decision, who are open to her. They are open to her candidacy. That's one of the things that we have seen in the polling since she went to the top of the ticket. People have less concrete views of her than they did of Joe Biden, but that's an opportunity for her. So she needs to speak to those voters in the Sun Belt states, in the Rust Belt states, who are going to ultimately determine the outcome of this election.
So, Mark, that's kind of where those voters are, but who are those voters? Are those voters Haley Republican voters who didn't vote for Donald Trump in the Republican primaries?
Well, I think there are probably a lot of folks that voted for Joe Biden in 2020, maybe in some of those suburban collar areas of our major cities who maybe didn't like the way Donald Trump tweeted or the tone that he used in 2020. But now they have buyer's remorse because they've seen the results of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in office. And it shows up at the gas station, the grocery store. They see it happening with the southern border, and they don't like it. And so reminding people that, look, things were better off when he was in the White House, and she's the reason why you don't like where we are right now. That's the key, that it's okay to be like, well, I tried it this way in 20. Can't do it again in 24.
So, Kate, you hear Mark trying in this discussion to tie Harris to President Biden. How important is it for her in 20 seconds or less to separate herself from President Biden?
I think she needs to be her own candidate. And I think we've seen her do that. I think what you saw at the convention, what you heard was not a separation on policy. And actually, if you dig in, a lot of the Biden economic policies themselves are actually quite popular. And so what she has an opportunity to do is to build on that foundation, but do it in her voice. And I think, again, you saw her do that at the convention, and I expect that that's what we'll see from her on the stage tonight.
Kate Bedingfield, Mark Lauder, thank you both so much. Very, very informative discussion.